Welcome everybody to this Planning Committee meeting, the 3rd of October 23. I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, Chair of the committee. Dale?
Hi, I'm Councillor Dale Roker. I'm the Vice Chair of the committee.
Hello all, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning for Monmouthshire.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire.
Mark Davis, Highway Development Manager, Monmouthshire.
Amy Longford, Development Management Area Manager, Monmouthshire.
Adam Foot, Senior Development Management Officer.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor to the Planning Committee. Anna Hawker, Legal Services.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. Can I remind everybody who have joined us remotely to use the hands up in the chat rather than the ordinary hands up facility, and to keep your cameras on. We'll be watching. If the cameras go off, we obviously won't be able to allow you to vote, as we won't have evidence that you've been listening to the full conversation. We've got a couple of new people with us today. Anna, welcome. You're sitting in and as a trainee just to see what goes on. And can I welcome Councillor Sarah Birch, who's joining us for the first time. She's replacing Councillor Ben Callard, who's moved into the cabinet. So we congratulate him on that and thank him for the work he's done on the planning committee. He was a very useful member of the committee. Richard, do we have any apologies for absence?
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Webb.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. I have to make a declaration of interest, which I prepared, and I shall read it out. I would like to declare a prejudicial interest in application DM 2023-01042. For the benefit of members of the public, I am aware that posters were circulated which purported to come from me in relation to a planning enforcement matter on the same land that is now the subject of application DM 2023-01042. Although this current application is separate and distinct from the enforcement case and the posters were not in fact prepared by me, I wanted to place this on record, and I will exit the chamber when this application is discussed. We'll now move on to the rest of the agenda and the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have somebody thank you, Councillor Powell and Councillor Rook. The next item on the agenda is to look at the applications before us, and the first one is application DM 2022-00331, the development of commercial units suitable for classes B1, B2 and B8 plus associated external works on land at Severn Bridge Industrial Estate, Pill Road, Caldicot. You'll be aware that this came before us previously, and we went against officer recommendation, and it's now come back to us for conditions, but I've just lost, bear with me a sec, I've just lost the statement on that. So, as members of this committee are aware, we have previously given the application considerable debate in the August meeting, and we concluded to approve the application against officer recommendation in relation to national flooding policy, because given the planning balance, the benefits of this economic development outweigh the potential flood risks to this less vulnerable use. NRW have reviewed this decision and have not offered any further comment or provided any additional conditions. The application is now before committee to consider the proposed conditions, and of course this is an outline. Adam, you're presenting this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so members of the committee will remember that this application was reported to them in August with a recommendation to refuse on the basis of flooding. Committee resolved to approve the application. Therefore, this application is back before the committee to agree conditions to be attached to the consent. The application seeks outline consent for the expansion of an existing industrial estate on land allocated for industrial development within the Monmouthshire Local Development Plan. Therefore, there's no objection to the principle of the proposed development. The only matter for concern and the only suggested reason for refusal was the flood risk. The flood risk is shown on the extended flood risk is shown on the maps shown on screen. As the application is for outline consent, final details will need to be approved via a reserved matters application. Following the previous committee meeting, this application was reported back to NRW for any further comments. NRW have not suggested any further conditions or sought for the application to be called in for consideration by Welsh Government. NRW have suggested that the details within the flood consequence assessment are conditioned, as the flood consequence assessment is listed in the approved plans, and this therefore secures compliance with those proposed details. It is therefore for this committee to agree the suggested conditions for the proposed development. These include details into the sort of standard details you would expect to be attached to any outline consent, securing details of reserved matters to be submitted, also details in terms of landscaping, external finish, boundary treatments, and some details to be submitted prior to the commencement of development in respect of securing or ensuring that there is adequate controls in place to safeguard the amenity of neighbouring residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. We don't have the ward member here for that thing, but we do have a Caldicot member. Tony, do you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This went to the Planning Committee some while ago, and we met on site. I live 100 yards from this particular site. I've never seen it flood, although it is in the flood risk area. And on that meeting, I think I proposed that we accept the recommendation. Went back to the NRW, and they've come back to us now with the view they've got, and I would move that we accept the updated recommendation with the conditions to go to delegated, is it, or whatever. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Easton. We don't have anybody from the Town Hall Community Council. Councillor Powell, are you trying to attract my attention?
I'd like to second that, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. We have no body registered to speak on it. So, Richard, can we have a voting function up, please? Can everybody vote no then, please?
Still one.
Okay, so that is approved, 13 for approval and 1 abstain.
Okay, thank you, Paige. The next item is item 4.2, but as I've stated, I'm unable to take part in this application, so Vice Chair, Councillor Rook, will be taking over the meeting.
Okay, thank you, members. We're here now to look at application DM 2023-01042, change of use from agricultural land for the keeping of horses, proposed erection of stable block for 5 horses, erection of ancillary storage building, construction of menage, land northwest of Holly Lodge Road, from the A48 to Justo Road, 5 lanes in Caerwent. We currently have a number of people to speak, but first I'll let Adam introduce the application, and then I'll call the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application site comprises an undeveloped field in 5 lanes. For the purposes of planning, the land is within the open countryside where development is strictly controlled. The report includes, just for clarity, the report includes some site history for a neighbouring dwelling that was automatically populated into the report. That does not relate to this land. It is for a neighbouring property, just for clarity. The site is accessed by an existing entrance which is shared by a neighbouring field. There are elements of unauthorised operational development on site, none of which form part of this application and are not sought for retention as part of this application. The unauthorised developments are subject to a separate enforcement investigation and should not be considered as part of the assessment of this application. Primarily, this application seeks consent for 2 elements: a change of use from agricultural to equestrian use, and the construction of a menage, stable block and store. From a land use perspective, it is well established that equestrian uses in the open countryside are acceptable and appropriate. No objection or concern is raised to the principle of this land being used for equestrian purposes. Regarding the built development, the riding arena is considered to be of a size that would be expected for personal use. Given its scale and form, it's not expected to have any adverse visual impact that would be detrimental to the character or amenity of the area. The stables and store building are considered to be an acceptable scale and design that are appropriate for the area. The neighbouring field has stables and store building of similar design, which is considered to be acceptable. Therefore, it's not considered that the built form as proposed would result in any unacceptable visual impact or be out of character with the existing pattern and scale of development in the area. The Council's ecologist, landscape officer and highways officer have been consulted on this application. No objection has been received from any. Additionally, CADU have been consulted in respect of the impact upon historic assets. No objection has been received from them either. There's a public right-of-way that crosses the site. This would need to be rerouted to accommodate the development. This is a separate process that falls outside the remit of the Town and Country Planning Act and would need to be pursued via the appropriate channels. It is considered that the proposed development is an appropriate use in this location. It is considered that there would be no unacceptable visual impact. Any impact in terms of highway safety and highway safety have been considered and are deemed to be acceptable. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. We now move on to the speakers. Just a reminder for the speakers that you have 4 minutes to speak. And the first speaker I'll be calling is Councillor Mike John for Caerwent Community Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is such a mess. The sort of mess that gives planning a bad press. The sort of mess that doesn't do this council or this committee any favours. Council asks the Community Council for its opinion, and it is our unanimous opinion that you can't approve this application. You've read our objections, and we'd like you to think about them. I hope you've read the notes of yesterday's site meeting. There's a herd of elephants in this room. Unresolved issues, unanswered questions. Issues that should have been dealt with, questions that should have been answered. My Community Council should have been more strident, but we thought that MCC were on the case, and they weren't. The community asks us for our opinion. They've been asking since 2021. What's going on up there? What are they digging for? What's that blot on the landscape? Why have they cut down the hedges? Have you seen that fence gate? Don't they need permission? Why have they dragged that cesspit up there? Why are there cameras and dogs on the public footpath? There are buildings in a storage container. What about the wildlife? Surely the County Council should have been all over this. Even my partner woke me in the middle of the night and pointed to the lights, the security lights on the horizon. I and my fellow community councillors replied that we've referred this to MCC. They're investigating. There's talk of enforcement. An application came here. You turned it down, it went to appeal, and the appeal people agreed. And then a new planning application. You've seen the planning officer's report, you've heard him speak to it. It considers the new scaled-back application, addresses the raised objections, complies with the law. But you know, sometimes the law is an ass, or in this case, a small herd of horses. An enormous stable to be built in block work for 5 pet horses and an associated storeroom in a field not big enough for 5 horses. When did the health of horses become a planning issue? It's a bit like me asking to build an extension on the side of my house with a picture window overlooking next door, but it's okay because it's for my granny and she's sick in bed and won't be able to look through it. There's an exercise yard, the size of my school playground, for a few pet horses. There's a cesspit, the one we're asked to ignore, the one buried in that field, probably bigger than the one attached to my home. Why does a stable need a cesspit? Are they collecting horse urine? You have the paperwork, you have the officer's report, the community council objections, you have citizen concerns, you'll have read them, studied them, I hope. You have the plans, the drawings of the site, as it is now and as it will be. What do they tell you? Are you sure that approving this application with the attached conditions is the right decision? The list of conditions itself suggests that this could be problematic. Are you confident that MCC will be able to monitor and enforce these conditions? I'm not.
Just, you have 30 seconds.
Their track record on this field is dire. The unauthorised buildings are developed in the officer's report, but the argument suggesting that they can't be considered here as they're not relevant is Kafkaesque in its naivety. Of course they're relevant. Sometimes the law is an ass. There's some work to be done in this room to restore public confidence in the planning process. Our community council believes that whatever you might think about the merits of this application, you can't approve it until the enforcement issues are resolved. And if they can't be resolved, approval shouldn't be given.
Could you
Please
wind
deny
up,
this
please?
application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Objector Roger Nazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to speak today. How can this application be considered retrospective? None of the proposed structures exist on site. The opportunity of a retrospective application was presumably offered by MonCC in the spirit of cooperation and to avoid costly enforcement action against unlawful development. While such is absent from the proposals, this application is a snub to the LPA's generous offer. However, to today's recommendation for approval, compare the recommendation with the refusal of July 22. There are glaring inconsistencies. July 22, with stables for 5 horses, refused. This application, 5 stables. The refusal included an ancillary building. It's now a larger footprint of 90 square metres. July 22, 800 square metre menage. Refused. It's now Olympic-sized at 1,200 square metres. Contained in the refusal are also details of the entrance, but this time none are supplied, even though requested by the LPA. It's the same application with grander ambitions, with a different conclusion. Please explain this wholly inconsistent approach. It's the same. Those members able to visit the site will have noted the extensive altered entrance, which now appears as industrial, failing to harmonise with or enhance the rural setting as required by policy. This clearly concerns the LPA, who recently requested full details of the entrance, including an elevation. This has not been supplied. Please explain its absence and how it has impacted upon compiling the report. As to the altered entrance, it is contrary to the planning approval of 20 years ago. This and a covenant placed upon the land both cite similar reasons: protection of landscape amenity, making clear the council's motivation when selling the land shortly afterwards. Please explain why this approval has been disregarded and is also absent from the relevant planning history. This application is missing detail. No waste management plan, no SUD or SAB approval or drainage scheme, no details for parking, no hard and soft landscaping schedule, no lighting plan, no ecological appraisal. How can this committee even think of approving? It's inadequate. There is an over-reliance on conditions to control such emissions. This is unsatisfactory. Is it acceptable to have such a heavy reliance on conditions for such a simple application?
You have 1 minute left.
The ancillary storage building at 90 square metres, which equates to 3 double garages, is excessive. A permanent building of concrete block with windows, totally unsuited for the storage of hay, which is the justification offered. An open-sided barn would be more suitable. All other equestrian provision along the lane are temporary wooden structures, most having earth floors, as is the norm. The application fails to satisfy relevant policy. RE6 presumes against new build development in open countryside. These are permanent concrete buildings in a field with no justification. 3 of the 4 criteria of LC1 remain unsatisfied, still presented as overdevelopment, causing unacceptable impact. LC5 requires small scale. Is an Olympic-sized menage small scale? All of these policies were cited as satisfactory in the recent refusal of a very similar application.
Can you draw to a close now, please?
I implore the committee to seek explanation for this inconsistency. Unsatisfactory answers to this and other questions posed demand the application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no supporters, but we do have the applicant's agent, Chris Gosling. You have 4 minutes too, Chris.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nazy, could you turn your mic off, please? Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to deal with the planning application, because obviously that's what's in front of members, and there is a very comprehensive report explaining that. So I understand a site visit was carried out yesterday. I hope that members had the opportunity to have a look at the context of the site as well. If you did, you will have seen that most of the surrounding land is already in equestrian use. That is part of the proposal, and obviously there aren't any issues with that have been raised by anybody. So the site is 5 acres. That's an adequate size for the welfare of 5 horses. Therefore, it follows that the stable block, as proposed, will house 5 horses because the land can support that. The storage building has in fact been fully justified to the council's satisfaction. That's not only the building itself, but we've also justified the size of it in an apparently satisfactory way. The final part of this proposal is the arena, and that will be the last part of the development. We're fully aware that that's going to require rerouting the footpath. That will obviously happen before any work starts on the arena.
It has been mentioned that there are a lot of conditions. I don't disagree with that at all. However, that is the appropriate way of managing the details on site, and the client is fully prepared to abide by these conditions. In summary then, this is a relatively small-scale development that is the right size for this site, and there's no issue with keeping of horses on the site. Therefore, it follows that there shouldn't be an issue with maintaining their welfare. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Adam, do you have any comments on the questions asked?
Yes, so I'll come back in just with some points to address, and then if members have any further questions, we can cover those off individually. In relation to the detail submitted, we are satisfied that there is sufficient detail to determine the application. Anything further that we need is requested or sought to be secured via condition. That is a typical means of determining an application. If the use of conditions is not considered to be unusual in any respect, so no concern is raised in relation to that. In terms of the comments in relation to additional detail being sought by the local planning authority, we did seek additional information and clarification with regards to any requirement for hard standing or any alterations to the fencing and the gate, to see if they were to be included within this submission, but they are not. So they do not form part of this application. So in that respect, them not being included within this is wholly appropriate. With regards to the mentions of the unauthorised development, including the septic tank, these do not form part of this consent, and they are being dealt with by a separate enforcement investigation. This application does not seek their retention and therefore does not form part of the assessment of this application. With regards to the appeal that was mentioned, I dealt with that application. The reason that the appeal was dismissed was on the basis of the inaccuracy of the plans that were submitted to support the previous application. Therefore, the inspector ruled that they were not able to make a decision given the inaccuracy of the plans. It was not dismissed on the basis of any planning merits. Then, with regards to the covenant that was mentioned, this is not something that the planning authority can become involved within. It's outside the remit of the Town and Country Planning Act, and therefore would not have a bearing on the assessment of this application. In respect of the details in terms of there not being a SUDS or a SAB application, it's mostly that follows the grant of planning consent, so no concern is raised in that respect. There is a condition on with regards to drainage to secure that, but there's no concern raised in them not having their SAB consent up front. Again, no lighting is proposed as part of this submission, and we have a condition on to limit the lighting on site. So no concern is raised in that respect. With regards to the concerns raised on there not being a parking area shown, again, this was asked if there was an intention for any parking area to be constructed on site. There is not. So that does not form part of this application because it's not sought for. No consent is sought for that. So yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that answers the points raised.
Thank you very much. We now move to questions from committee members. Councillor Eason, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I got considerable concerns this application being put before us today. It seems to me, to think of the pun, putting the cart before the horse. The agent has just said that he's confident that his tenant or the customer, whatever, will abide by conditions. Well, at this moment in time, it doesn't appear that they've abided by those conditions in the past. For example, whilst it is not part of this plan application, there's an enforcement order in place which could impinge on future work. There's question marks that the Caerwent Town Council Community Council, are concerned about the hedge removal and the fence being put up. I can't comment on the cesspit, but I am also concerned that illegal photographs of walkers are being taken by cameras which I think should not be there. So until all these matters are dealt with, yes, this plan application is not impinged on them, but in total, by accepting this today, it's going to put a question mark about the hedge going back, the covenant that might or might not exist, the public right-of-way. It seems to me the indication is the public right-of-way is just a line on a map. Well, the public right-of-way is not just a line on a map. To get the public right-of-way extinguished and re-established would take maybe 9 months, for example. Firstly, to extinguish the right-of-way, there's got to be public consultation for, I think it's 28 days. If there are no objections, that will go probably to a non-committee decision. But if there are objections, it will probably go to the licensing committee. That licensing committee could determine whether or not that public right-of-way could be extinguished. Whatever the decision out of that, should it be extinguished and rerouted, there's another 42 days for any objections to Welsh Government. So it's not just a line on the map. It's a serious legal matter to change a public right-of-way. So to bring this plan application to us today, I think is jumping the gun. I would like to see it withdrawn until such time as a decision is made on the hedge, that the covenant is examined, that the public right-of-way is determined either yes or no, that the enforcement matters are dealt with, and as the agent said, eventually any conditions that are going to be put on haven't been abided by at the moment. So I don't have much faith in the tenant abiding by conditions. So unless those conditions are dealt with, I think this application should be pulled for now, withdrawn, deferred, whatever you want to do. Thank you, Chair, and I might like to come back after.
The head of planning is going to make a comment there now.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. I just wanted to step in there really and try and advise members and help members in terms of the determination of this application. Fully appreciate it's got a complicated planning history. There is a live enforcement notice on the site, but members need to remember, members of the planning committee, that you're looking at the development proposal which is in front of you, that forms part of this planning application. You can take into consideration aspects which are not before you. So the enforcement notice isn't before members today. That development isn't before members. The reference to the diverting of the public right-of-way, that isn't before members today. That will be a matter separate, as Councillor Easton has outlined, by a separate committee. So what planning committee members need to focus on is this development proposal in front of you for equestrian use within the open countryside for the stable block and the storage building. Is that acceptable to members or not, ultimately? Does it comply with Monmouthshire's local development plan and the planning policies within it? Those other aspects, they are parts in terms of the whole development proposal, but you need to remember that as a planning committee, you're looking at this particular application. You can't comment or get involved in aspects which aren't part of this. There is a live enforcement notice. The council is taking action and working with the applicant to amend those aspects. And there are other consents that are needed outside of the planning committee. So just wanted to advise members to stay focused in terms of the development proposal that is before you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just one small point. One of the gentlemen that spoke before made a remark about the fact that they were woken at one night with a bright light in their house. Was that light? Because when you gave the presentation, it said there was no lighting involved. Was that light from that place, or was that light from somewhere else?
I believe that it was environmental officers from this county that dealt with that issue at the time when the lights were dealt with. But certainly that there has been lighting on that site, and I think members will have noticed lights on the site when they made their site visit yesterday. They weren't on because it was daytime, but there is lighting there.
Thank you for that clarification. Does that answer your question, Councillor Farrell? Thank you very much. Councillor Bryn.
Thank you, diolch pawb. I wondered, I appreciate that the right of way isn't part of the planning per se, but I wondered if we could request a condition that the application, if the application is approved today, that the work doesn't commence until the permission has been approved to divert the public right of way in order to prevent obstruction of it. My main concern is the width of the proposed new footpath and the responsibility, the maintenance of the green corridor. I couldn't see on the plans how wide that was, and should permission be permitted, but that's not enough space. It'll be too late once these buildings are erected, and so I wondered if we could condition it that is suitably sorted before any works begin on the site. Also, I could see no information on the portal of an ecology report or an environmental impact report. I wondered if that could also be a condition, bearing in mind the location of one of the UK's rarest bumblebees nearby, listed as one of the priority species of conservation in the Environment of Wales Act. Surely it calls for a robust ecology report in this instance, as this may affect the soft landscaping details and planting plan. Diolch yn fawr.
Adam, do you want to just comment on that?
Yes, sure. So with respect to the condition as requested for to restrict development until the public right of way had been diverted, that wouldn't meet the tests as set out in the circular. So because it's controlled under separate legislation, we shouldn't be looking to control that via the Town and Country Planning Act. It doesn't fall within our remit. Each area of responsibility has its own section of responsibility. Therefore, they must enforce it under that section of legislation. We cannot sort of cross over, if that makes sense. Can certainly attach an informative to the consent. However, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to condition it in that manner. With regards to the ecology report, an ecology report has been submitted and considered by the council's ecologist. The report does contain sensitive information, therefore it's not on the public register, but it has been considered by the in-house ecologist and is deemed to be appropriate to support the proposed development.
Thank you, Adam. We move on then to Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Councillor Rook. Firstly, as Councillor Mike John from Caerwent Community Council has started off by saying, I think something along the lines of, this is a bit of a mess. Well, I think I'd have to agree with him on that. I know that we have to look at the application for what it is, but there does appear to be a lot of moving parts with the site itself and inconsistencies with the information within the application, such as the covenant issue, rerouting the footpath enforcement, allegedly incorrect details on the application, retrospective parts, no parking, etc. And all these things really don't help with trying to make a clear decision. I know Craig has tried to sort of focus us, but for me personally, all these issues still sort of cloud my mind a bit. And as Councillor Tony Easton says, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit on this one, and I'd have to agree with him and say that I think I'd be happy to see this one being deferred pending more detail. I do have some questions if officers would be able to answer them. Can you give us any more information regarding the similar application that was refused by PEDO? I know you said something about inaccuracy of the plans, but I just wondered if you could expand on that. Secondly, which parts of the application are retrospective? What is the acreage at the site? Now, the applicant's agent has just said in his presentation that it's 5 acres. I've read elsewhere 2 different acreage sizes, and obviously that is quite important when you've you've got horses or animals at the site. What is the likelihood of this getting passed if it did go to appeal? I don't know if that's something that officers are actually allowed to answer, but just sort of bearing in mind that if it did get refused and went to appeal, I'm just mindful of costs that the council could occur. And if we did defer today, pending sort of further information and detail, can the applicant still go straight to appeal, or do they have to honour the fact that we wish to defer? And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Adam, do you want to come back on any of those points?
Yes. So with regards to the inaccuracy of the plans supporting the previous application, initially the applicant had a different agent acting in this matter. The plans submitted were deemed suitable for the application to be valid. Subsequently, when asking for some amendments, now a previous application had a significantly larger storage building, a significantly higher building. The concern was raised in that respect in terms of the visual impact. So an amended plan was sought. The applicant parted ways with the previous agent and submitted hand-drawn drawings which were not suitable to support the proposed development. It therefore progressed with to be refused. This was considered by the Planning Inspectorate and they deemed that the plans were not suitable to support the proposed development or to make any sort of determination in respect of the proposal. Therefore, it was the appeal was dismissed, but like I said, on the basis that the plans were inaccurate only. With regards to the retrospective element of it, the only element of this that is retrospective that I can think of would be the proposed use, because there are horses on site at present. Any development in terms of built development or operational development that's on site currently is not sought for retention. The proposed buildings are not there at present, but the land is hosting horses at present. And I think that was it. Oh, and in respect of the appeal, yes, if we do not make a decision here, then the applicant does have the right of appeal to go to, which will be considered then by an inspector. They would, I know you mentioned costs, they would also be able to apply for costs, in terms of non-determination, and they would have to be able to demonstrate that they had sufficient information for this application to be able to proceed, or that it's reasonable for details to be secured via condition. So yes, they would have the right of appeal and they would have the opportunity to apply for costs.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you for that, Adam, but it has made me consider this to be more of a mess, because we're being asked to look at a number of different things here. There's always going to be some unease in relation to a respective application, and I'm aware that we should be looking at this separately. Installing a septic tank in a building with a satellite dish, though, to me is concerning. And it does seem to me, as Councillor Eason has said and Councillor McKenna, that we are looking at this in the wrong order. And I think we should be looking at the path and the enforcement issues and then considering the planning application. But from what I'm hearing to you, that could be a cost to the council, which concerns me. But I would propose that we defer this.
So is it okay if I come in, Chair?
Yeah, please carry on.
What I would say is we don't have any control over when someone submits an application. All we're able to do is to determine applications as they're submitted. We have to consider them without prejudice and against the national and local development plan policies. We as officers have assessed this we have to determine things in line with those policies and have to take action, if needed, through the appropriate channels. The unauthorised developments that are not deemed to be appropriate and acceptable are being pursued via the appropriate channels of an enforcement notice. The change of use of the land and the proposed buildings on site are being sought consent via the planning application. They are deemed to be acceptable, and therefore this application is recommended for approval.
Okay, Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I also have concerns about the extensive conditions and the inconsistencies. I think the applicant's agent, Mr. Gosling, just said that 5 acres is enough for 5 horses. I've looked it up and checked again. Greater than 6 acres, 6 acres as a minimum, so I understand. So that's one thing. As I say, the extensive conditions, the fact that there's block work in the buildings that have block work rather than just a temporary nature, they're more of a permanent nature, and that also leads into the fact there's going to be storage in there, and I think there's some fire safety, probably risk conditions that they might be prevalent. Pleased to see that hedges are going to be reinstated. Concerned also about the camera, that's really not right. And wondered if there's a way that we can encourage the timeframe of work, which you've said not. Really, it should be the removal of what the existing, then apply for the right of way, and then act on this permission. But so really about the permanent nature of the storage and the building, response on that, please, and the possible fire issue. And like others yesterday, I noticed there was runs for animals, and there was the dish, and there was obviously it's been set up as being a more used personal space than has been discussed here. So really around the inconsistency and the number of conditions, I would suggest that we also defer until we've got answers to those, please.
Yeah, Craig is just going to comment now.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. I just thought I'd come in there again in terms of in relation to what's there on site at the moment. That isn't, and I know I've repeated myself, that isn't before members. We have to be really clear here in terms of ensuring that we look at the application that's in front of us for a stable block, a menage and a storage building. Timber structures in the open countryside, are they appropriate? Are they appropriate use of the land? Are they appropriate structures for the open countryside? That is what is before members today. There are other elements, and I appreciate what Councillor Bond and other members of the committee are saying with regards to this stuff on site at the moment, but that is part of an enforcement notice. The cesspit is part of the enforcement notice. There are other aspects which are considered to be unacceptable to officers of the local planning authority, which the council is taking action against. But the application that's before you is what members need to consider. Looking at the application, and I know there's discussions with regards to what would the chances be if it was refused, I would question what that reason for refusal would be. Where is the harm to this equestrian use in the open countryside? I think members need to ask themselves that question ultimately. And also in respect of the other aspects which are unauthorised, as I said, the council is taking action against that. So members shouldn't be looking at those aspects. They are all valid reasons to take this application forward with regards to what has been proposed. There was one other point I was going to make, which has completely slipped my mind now. It might come back to me in a moment, but Councillor Bond.
The block work.
Oh, the block works. Yes, thank you, Councillor Bond. So
nothing like next doors.
Yes. Yes. So the block work, potential fire hazard. We have spoke to building control. This wouldn't need building regulations, and this would be a matter for the applicant to consider in terms of the health and safety of that exact building if it's not covered by any other legislation. But there's no reason in terms of why a building should be open or if it should be closed. That is a matter for the applicant. What's before planning committee members today is the visual impact of that storage building acceptable? You know, if it's block work and then clad on the outside with timber, what is that visual impact of of that structure? Is it going to be harmful? And they're the things in terms of the wider countryside which members need to consider themselves with. I would argue that it is appropriate and acceptable to have block work with timber cladding on the outsides. There are a number of stable blocks across the county like that.
Thanks for that, Craig. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Councillor Rook. And thank you, Adam, for clarifying the point that there are actually horses present at this site. And I am concerned for the welfare of these horses. I hope that the enforcement process is, well advanced on this, because those horses are the priority, really. The enforcement needs to happen pretty darn quick. The new stables will need to be built first in order to accommodate those horses. And I think members should approve the application in front of us as it is recommended by officers. I quite agree the impact of the stable block. There are many blocks like this around our county. These are farm buildings, aren't they? So I don't feel that that's an issue. So therefore I'm supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick question. I was wondering, because a number of councillors have got concerns about some aspects of this application. I wondered if it'd be worthwhile splitting it into change of use and the planning application so we can debate the two separately.
Yeah, the thing is here is we can only deal with applications as they come to us in the form that they come to us. We cannot determine that this application should be split or not. That's down to the applicant to decide. So no, we cannot split it from a planning application to a change into a planning application and a change of use. It's how it comes to us.
Okay, yeah.
Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. There are a lot of enforcement notices put out by this council on individuals and places, and quite a lot of them are just not followed up properly. I can name 2 or 3 straight away. But in this particular case, the agent has said that the applicant will abide by all the conditions that are put before us. It's quite clear that the applicant hasn't abided by any of them previously, so how can we trust it being done in the future? The hedge was taken illegally, the covenant is supposed to be there, and I know it's not part of the plan application, but I don't believe this application should be brought before us by officers today. It's a weak application, it's flawed, and I do believe it should be deferred to the officers to go back and sort out where we are before they bring an application like this towards us. It might, in the end of the day, be acceptable, but at the moment it's not acceptable to me because I cannot trust that the applicant will abide by the conditions you want to put on it. He's shown no intention of doing it so far, so why should he change his mind now? So I'll second Councillor Riley's proposal to defer this, and I move that we defer it.
Okay,
so the officers will go back and...
If we defer, then the applicant is able to go directly to appeal.
Well, let him go to appeal. I believe the strength on the side of what hasn't been done to what might be done in the future. That's my view. I like to see enforcement notices followed through. I like to see them applied. I can name them in my ward where, because they've not been applied properly, the person doing it has got away with it. And it's about time we stop doing that.
The other thing that I'm going to comment on, Tony, is the previous application was refused, so there would have been no conditions imposed for the applicant to have to adhere to because it was refused. He was not allowed to do that development. The things that he's done on that site is subsequently is where the enforcement action being taken needs to run its course. We can only, as a planning committee, we can only decide on an application as it is in front of us. We cannot speculate on what's going to happen with the enforcement case or the public right-of-way.
Not speculating, Chair. I am basing fact. Conditions were imposed previously have not been abided by. So putting new conditions on may not even change that. I understand where you are as a planning authority, but I think this application should not put us in a position today and come to us as it stands, quite honestly. Yes, I understand where you are planning-wise, but had it come to us with a clean sheet, I might have a different view on it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lisa, for the comments. It is difficult when work is done unauthorised, and I think we've seen that before the planning committee many times before. But we have to be careful in terms of the applicant, in terms of outlining what those future intentions are. There have never been any conditions applied on this site because there's never been any authorised development. There has been unauthorised development, and there was an enforcement notice which unfortunately was withdrawn because of advice from the planning inspector. We now have a live enforcement notice. We also have a live planning application in front of us. The applicant has outlined that they will comply with those conditions, and if consent is granted today, then those conditions will be enforceable and we'll be able to take action on. So therefore, we can't do it based on personal people and how they act. It has to be on land use issues and conditioning that land use and the buildings, rather than dealing with the actual person who's applying for it, because the planning consent goes with the land, and those conditions will be tied to the land, not the person. So I can see where Councillor Eason's concerns are with regards to the history of the site and how the unauthorised development has happened. However, that can prejudice this planning application that's before you in terms of the people that are involved. It has to be based on land use planning matters.
I think, Craig, that you prejudiced this case full stop by bringing it today. It should not have come to us, as far as I'm concerned. It's no prejudice in us and yourselves, where this case could have been held back to make sure you've done the job, first of all, to get the enforcement done and everything. It's now putting me in a position where I am going against what your recommendations, I feel I'm going against your recommendations on the basis of the fact that, in my mind, it should never have come to us as a planning application until you were satisfied that all the preconditions previously had been applied by. As far as the camera is concerned on the public right-of-way, I wasn't aware of this site, because I had complaints of my residents in my ward who were walking those areas. They came to me, what's this camera doing on a public right-of-way? I didn't realise it was the same place. I was going to follow it up. Now, the police have been informed on this matter because it's legal. It's illegal to have a camera there. That hasn't been removed. It's still there. There are cameras on the gate. They're still there. So, really and truly, I do disagree with those officers. You should have cleared up all the back problems before you brought this application to us. It's putting me in a position where I'm considering going against what you want on the basis of a planning application, which may well be valid, but it shouldn't have come to us.
Councillor Eaton, I completely hear your concerns, and exactly the same way you're in a position with regards to making a decision as member of the planning committee. As officers, we're making you a recommendation based on land use planning matters. So those matters that you've discussed, they're outside of planning control. We have had discussions with regards to the cameras and other aspects of the development, and the unauthorised part of the development we are taking action against. So as a recommendation, we have got all the information to inform the decision. We have got conditions associated with the recommendation which will ensure that development is acceptable. We wouldn't present it to you if we weren't satisfied that this was an acceptable form of development for the open countryside.
I know what you say.
Okay, can we move on then to Councillor Crook?
Thank you, Chair. When one reads the correspondence we received since the closing report, I notice that there seems to be a restrictive covenant thought to be on this land about agriculture only. I just wondered where we stood with that, really. Whether there's a stipulation that we could not grant a change of use because there's a covenant. I'm not too aware of that. Would like the clarification, really.
Yes, so the restrictive covenant is separate. It doesn't form, it's not within the remit of the Town and Country Planning Act, so it's well concerned with operational development and land use only, so that is separate, and if there's concern around that, that could be again explored via the correct legal channels, but it does not form part of the Town and Country Planning Act and therefore doesn't impact on the assessment and determination of this application.
The other question I may ask is that there seems to be a concern that these buildings could possibly be turned quite easily into living accommodation, and perhaps if this was to be going forward with approval, could we not put conditions on that could not happen going forward, that they would remain as stables or as such buildings?
It wasn't considered that the buildings or those conditions were necessary, so they wouldn't meet the test, and no, in respect of what they're applying for, it's a sort of a particular land use, so equestrian use, and these buildings would be in association with those use. For the buildings to be used for a residential purpose, that would require an independent new consent, so it would be a new application to change that use. So it's not considered that they are required, so that's why they haven't been suggested.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Garrett.
I wasn't able to go on the visit in the morning, but I did go yesterday evening about 5:15, just in case my visit was picked up on the security cameras. I struggling with this as well, like Councillor Eason and other councillors, because the plans themselves, I wouldn't approve, say, a housing development without an idea where the road's going to go. There's no hard standing on the plan. There's no diagram showing the kind of layout of the land and the position of the structures that are going to go there. I think we've been put in a very difficult position on this one, because I don't think we've got all the facts. The plans don't really do it for me. I'm not convinced that they're complete. So that's why I'm struggling with this one. I appreciate everything we've been told about considering this, but I did see the site. I've been there, and it's the plans themselves I don't think they're complete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Bromfield.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Faye, can I just stop you a sec? Adam wanted to come back and comment.
No problem.
So just in response to Councillor Garrett's comments, so with respect to this, there is no hard standing proposed. That's why it's not shown on the proposed plans. So it's not that it's missing, it's that it isn't proposed. We have an existing and a proposed site layout which shows the position or the proposed position of the buildings, and therefore we consider that we have sufficient information to make the assessment. Thank you.
So there is hard standing there already running along the other side of the field, and I would expect them to be moving vehicles in and out of there, so that's why I was surprised there was no hard standing.
So with regards to the existing hard standing, that's covered under the enforcement notice. So, but again, that's not proposed, and it's not sought for retention.
Okay, you can come back in now, Councillor Bromfield.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I, like other members, I'm struggling with this application. I don't like to see applications so heavily conditioned, because, it shows inconsistencies within the application. Why should there be so many conditions? So I won't be supporting this application today, and I think that we have to listen to the concerns of the community council and of the residents that actually know this area. So like I said, I won't support this application, but I think that we should ask the applicant for more information and to crease out some of those inconsistencies, and bring the application back to us, because in its current state, I just don't think it would be responsible or appropriate for us as a committee to approve this application today. Thanks.
Okay. What additional information would you be looking to accompany this application, Councillor Bromfield?
It was just all of the information that's being asked for in the conditions, mainly as well with the public footpath. I think we need to see how that's going to be routed before we start looking at this. Like Councillor Eason said, that could become a legal issue. So there's just a few things that they're just not sitting right with me, like with the rest of the committee as well.
Okay, though, I'm going to again do as Craig has done, remind people that we can only decide an application on the information that is in front of us, and not on other areas that are outside of the scope of the planning committee, i.e. the enforcement or the public right-of-way variation to that. So that's dealt with by somebody else. So again, I'm just reinforcing the fact that we can only look at what we have in front of us. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Councillor Rook. Just two quick questions, if I may, and thank you for allowing me to come back in. Firstly, just coming back to the parking. So if there's no parking on site, where are they to park? And secondly, just coming back to Councillor Crook's point about the covenant, I understand it's a separate issue, but if we were to approve this application and then the covenant has to stay as it is, what will happen with any development that is already on the site? Are we then looking at an enforcement case and then any buildings have to get taken down? Just wondered if you could clarify those 2 points. Thank you.
So with respect to parking, the vehicles can pull onto a field as they do now with the agricultural use. So that's not considered to be a change from the existing situation. They're not seeking an area of hard standing for parking. Like I said earlier, it was discussed with the applicant and agent whether they wanted to seek to retain some of the existing hard standing that had been constructed, but they do not. So in that respect, the parking would just sort of occur on site, but there's no formal or designated parking that is proposed. And when you've got the nature of this use that's not considered to be unusual or problematic.
And Councillor McKenna, just in regards to the legal covenant on the site, that's the same as any piece of land. If it has a covenant on it, it's the landowner has to ensure they have the legal right to build something. That is outside of the planning consent, so you can potentially get planning consent on someone else's land if you wanted to, but you need to have the legal right to be able to build on it. So if there is a legal covenant on that land, that landowner needs to ensure they have that right to build on that site, and whoever can actually take action against that legal covenant, they will take action. So that is outside of the planning situation, and that happens on many a site in terms of housing developments when there are legal covenants on land, and it's exactly the same scenario with regards to this piece of land as well. So it's outside of the planning consent. If the planning committee were to grant planning consent, the landowner needs to make sure they have all the right consents in place to enable that to happen, and obviously with regards to the council's enforcement notice, the elements which we see are unacceptable and unauthorised would have to be removed from the site. So say for instance the hard standing, the cesspool, the cesspit, the fence on the front, all those aspects, the enforcement notice has been served on the applicant in relation to those matters. So the matters that, and I keep saying this, the matters before planning committee members, the stable block, the storage building and the menage.
Okay, Councillor Easton, you're up next. I'm only going to say you can have this say, but please make it personal into the conversation.
I'll try. Thank you, Chair. It's quite clear that this committee is not comfortable with this application in front of us today, for the reasons expressed by quite a number of them. We need to find a way of resolving this uncomfortableness today, because I don't think any of us are saying this application has to be thrown out. But what I feel is the feeling from the committee is that they're not happy with the way that the application has been presented to us. It's been put to us that we can only look at this in the light, not holistically, just looking as a light, as a single application, blinkered, as horses are. Whereas we can recognise there are other issues which are going to be brought into the fore should it be approved. Councillor Bronfield made some salient points, and Councillor McKenna as a way forward on this. I would second Councillor Riley's view that we should defer this, but I would say we defer it on the basis that we're not comfortable with what's presented to us, and that the officers go back to the applicant and iron out the inconsistencies and uncomfortableness that we feel. It sounds long-winded, but that's how I feel about this application. In a matter of time, in the course of time, this application might be successful, but at the moment we're not comfortable with it. I think I'm speaking for all of the committee bar one, and each got their own thoughts and minds. But I do believe that we cannot do anything today because we're uncomfortable with the way it's been presented to us, ignoring the aspects outside of it which we shouldn't really be considering. So I'm just not comfortable with it at all. Thank you. Thank you, Dale.
Okay, Craig is just going to say something now.
Sorry, he's come back in again. So thank you, Councillor Easton. I just wanted to sort of, I think we need to give the applicants, if members are concerned with regards to this noises with regards to deferment in terms of information, I think members need to give the applicants what that information they're asking for, what additional information above and beyond what's in this planning application do you want to be able to determine the application. Because I think we need to, if the application is deferred today, as officers, we need to know what members want. Obviously, officers are satisfied that there's enough information in the application, but what do members want? And then we can have that conversation with the applicant. But in terms of the aspects which are part of the enforcement notice, obviously that's separate, so we won't go into, able to go to them. But I think it's just an ask from me, really, to give some clarity to the applicant in terms of what information the members want, so we can go away and have that conversation if it is a decision to defer the application today.
I'm sort of seeking advice from the rest of the members. It's just my mind thinking. I am concerned that the agent did say that the applicant would abide by all the conditions. Well, quite clearly, the applicant hasn't abided by conditions in the past, so what's going to change? Now, that's one thing, really, I don't know what the word is for that, but that's important as far as I'm concerned. There have been expressions that the hedge has got to be put back. There's expressions that the fence has got to be taken down. There is a question mark about the covenant. Who owns the covenant? Well, okay.
We've said this a lot today. We need to stick to the application that's in front of us.
I'm trying to put forward,
but that's to do with the enforcement and stuff, and isn't something that we can decide on.
I'm trying to present ideas that Craig can take forward for us to defer this. Am I correct in saying that the rest of the committee would support the proposal by Sue Riley?
And until we get to that point, I can't tell you.
So we either got to get to that point and then decide what we say afterwards, I think, personally.
Well, before we move on, the agent just indicated he'd like to comment on something that you just mentioned, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously it would be ideal if we could sort everything out today. I'm not necessarily in a position to answer every question, and I would reiterate the point that what the members need to consider is what's actually in front of them, which is this planning application. I know there are a lot of other issues with the site, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions that I'm able to answer if it would assist members to come to a decision.
Well, through the Chair, I would ask you, would you take this back to the applicant and sort all these problems out?
As I've said, I think what we need to do is reach a conclusion today, and if any of the members have any direct questions to put to me, now, my response may be that it's got nothing to do with the application, but I will try and answer any questions that you have.
Well, through the Chair again, it's obvious that the Community Council and the community members don't trust this guy.
Can I just say something here? I think it's, the agent is 100% right. We can only decide on what's here in front of us. If you are minded, you're against the proposal as it stands in its current form, with all the other enforcement and the public right-of-way still needing to be dealt with, then look to vote to approve. If you feel that you can't square that with yourself, then you have to vote to reject it, and that's certainly within your gifts as members here to decide on how you vote. Deferring a vote on an application where the officers are deciding that they have enough information to determine a planning application that's in front of us it should be enough for us. It should be enough. Councillor Birch.
I share the discomfort with this application, having been to the site and heard from local residents. And I think there are lots of issues that we could wish were different. We could wish that the applicant had a greater sense of their duties with regard to rights of way, but that's a matter for rights of way and licensing. And we could wish that they hadn't done work on the site that makes it appear that there's an aspiration to live there. In advance of having planning approval, but that's a matter for enforcement. But I don't think there is anything in this application that justifies us in refusing it. In the application that we have in front of us, I don't think we can refuse it without potentially putting the authority at risk, as we've been told that if we defer it, it can go straight to appeal, and that, you know, I mean, I think we can wish that this good agricultural land had never been turned into pony paddocks, but that it has been established. So I don't see that we have any reason in planning terms to decline this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Bonds.
Okay, I was just going to raise when Councillor Eason was looking for reasons, what makes me feel uncomfortable, we've got no idea whether this public footpath can be moved and whether it's acceptable to go down along that channel. So I would like that to be one of the conditions. I don't think it is.
It's not. We're not able to condition that for the simple reason that it is not a decision that is able to be made by this committee. It would need to be going to the licensing committee to be able to determine that. If the licensing people decide that they don't want to move the prow, then the application will kind of fail, won't it? But anyway, Adam has something he wants to say.
Just need to answer that, please. If it would definitely fail.
The Public Rights of Way Department have been consulted on this application, and they're satisfied with the proposed amended route. So whilst it would need to go through...
A point of order, Chair. We cannot today discuss the fact that it's an approved route. It's got to go to the committee.
Members, I think we're getting a bit confused here with regard, and we are going around in circles a little bit in terms of what is considered here before you today as members of the Planning Committee looking at the Town and Country Planning Act and the planning applications before you. The footpath is part of separate legislation. One way of explaining it is like if you give planning consent today, there's another department which needs to give building regs. So no one can live in that property until that building regs is given. So in a very similar respect, you can give planning consent today, and then the licensing committee will look at the footway and provide advice. You've got the comments, as Adam has already said, with regards to what their thoughts are in relation to an amendment. If they can't get that amendment, they'll have to seek a variation to their planning application or come back in with a new planning consent. It is a separate thing, a separate item, separate matter which isn't before planning committee members today and is dealt with under different legislation. So I think we need to separate out this conversation with regards to the footpath. Members, if you're not happy with the development, that aspect of the footpath needs to be looked at separately, and that will be done by a different committee than is here today. So it's just this different legislation here which are overlapping, which is causing confusion, I think. You need to look at this in terms of whether this proposed development meets the requirements of your planning policies within your local development plan, rather than what is part of the Countryside Act with regards to public rights of way, which is a separate matter.
Thanks for that, Craig. There are currently no other hands showing up. Nobody else wishes to speak. In that case, we'll move to the votes. Sorry. Will somebody move to accept the recommendation, and then we can go to a vote? Councillor Butler. And I'll second it just to make it official. So if we can now have the vote, please, Rich. We're still waiting for 2 more to cast their vote. If you haven't, could you please?
Chair, could I just come in, please?
Yes, quickly.
I'm just wondering if there's going to be some confusion with this, because members have actually mentioned about deferring as well. Should that be an option on there? For approval, defer?
Deferring was discussed, and members were asked what additional information we could ask for to make the deferment happen. No other information was being sought apart from maybe we could do something around the enforcement or the public right of way, which is outside of the gift of this committee. So there was nothing that was suggested that required additional information from the applicant. So no, deferment is not on the an option, because there was no additional information that members were asking for.
Okay, thank you.
We're 1 member down with Councillor Murphy out. Is that the missing member?
Need to do it in person as well, because it's so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then do it in person.
Okay, because we believe we're 1 short, we're going to do it again.
There's 12 now.
Yeah, there should be 13. There was 14 on the last vote, and the chairman is out, and nobody else has left.
Is that the new vote up now?
Not yet. Okay. It's on its way. Right, here you go then, councillors, if you'd like to cast your votes. We have 11 members have cast their votes. If you're still an undecided, would you please hurry up and make your mind up? Because we've got no clear response from every councillor, we're going to go around the room and ask for their recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. So the first member I have is Councillor Bond. How are you voting?
I'm abstaining because because of all the reasons we've said.
Okay. Councillor Bromfield.
Against the approval.
Councillor Bryn.
Abstention.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Birch.
Approve.
Councillor Crook.
For.
Councillor Eason.
Against.
Councillor Garrett.
Against.
Councillor Howells.
For.
Councillor McConnell. Councillor McKenna.
Against.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Riley.
Against.
Councillor Rook.
For.
And I believe Councillor Webb is not with us, so that's the vote here. I'll just top them up. I make that 5 in favour, 6 against, and 2 abstentions.
Thanks, members, for the vote. We now need to determine the reasons that we'll be refusing the application ultimately. So this report will come back before Planning Committee with... Pardon, sorry? Yeah, we do need to get an indication from members in terms of what those reasons for refusal would be. Is that what you're saying, Adam? Sorry. Yeah.
So, anybody got any suggestions on what grounds we're refusing?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I heard Sue McConnell's, sorry, Councillor McConnell's name called, but I didn't hear a response.
Yeah, Richard called out Councillor McConnell's name in mistake. She's not here today.
Okay, thank you. That explains that. Thank you.
Chair.
Go ahead.
So is our reasons incomplete information, inconsistencies in information?
No, it's not, because we have all the information that we needed to determine this application. Members were asked what reasons they what additional information they needed, and we had nothing back. So now I'm re-asking, why are we refusing this application? What are the reasons that what more information do you need to determine this application? If it involves the PROW or the enforcement action, then we can't do that. So there's nothing to do with us.
I believe it's brought to us prematurely, quite frankly.
And me.
I mean, being premature isn't a reason for refusal, unfortunately.
I do believe that it's put to us prematurely. There's a lot of uncomfortability in this room, and I think that is an expression of how the members feel. And I think the agent has seen the uncomfortability, and maybe we'll take that into account.
Members, can I offer a bit of assistance, really, in terms of how to take this forward? I think a few members have raised concerns with regards to the information that has been presented by the applicant to the local planning authority. I would suggest if members could make the applicant aware of what information they would like, officers can go away and work with the applicant to get that information if that's what members are asking. We can certainly do that. If you feel that development is unacceptable and doesn't comply with local planning policy within our local development plan, then members need to outline why this development is unacceptable, and then obviously that would be form part of the reasons why this council is refusing planning consent. And there's a couple of options there, I think. One is to potentially give the applicants some guidance and some information in terms of what information members would like to see, and then we defer it, and applicants and officers can go away and have those conversations with the applicant. And secondly, then, if members are unhappy with development and want it to be refused, what are those reasons for the refusal?
Councillor Bryn, you suggested something in chat. Would you like to air that?
I'm trying to get, I didn't know if the wording was correct. My apologies. I'm trying to write it out to see if it made sense. So I was suggesting the overdevelopment and unacceptable adverse effect are an intensive use of land incompatible to its location and biodiversity and amenity. But I don't think it's quite worded correctly.
I just raised some concern in relation to using those when that hasn't been discussed via this committee or raised as a concern previously. So just in terms of the process, no concern was raised in relation to the overdevelopment or the or the use being over-intensified use, or that the land is incompatible in this location. As we've discussed and stated various times, the keeping of horses and equestrian uses are located in the countryside because they are a compatible use. With regards to its adverse impact upon landscape and biodiversity, again, these have been assessed by the council's ecologist and by our landscape officer, and they're deemed to be acceptable. So with regards to any concerns in the in respect of the points raised by Councillor Bryn, I would just be concerned that these have not been debated by this committee or raised as a concern previously.
Yeah, I think nobody's denying that it's a suitable space for keeping horses, but I believe that the size of the development had been raised in discussion, the size of the menage and the lack of the ecology report and the concerns about loss of amenity because of the removal or suggested removal of the footpath. And so I believe those items had actually come up as points of concern that needed further information. Diolch.
I'm sorry, Chair, I just wanted to come back in again there. We have to be really careful here in terms of the decision this council's making. With regards to the footpath, I think we've discussed this a lot. It's not before Planning Committee in relation to the footpath today. Ecology comments, we have got comments from your biodiversity officers advising you as members that this development is acceptable. They've reviewed the ecology report that's been submitted and are satisfied and it's acceptable. I think we do need to be careful in terms of the decision-making process. I would urge members to give the applicants some advice with regards to what information you require to make this into a positive determination. And if you can't do that, and if you feel that this development is unacceptable, then we need to have valid reasons as to why the proposed development is unacceptable. So I think, Councillor Bryn, you've mentioned overdevelopment in terms of the stable block, and that's essentially something that we could suggest to the applicant to go away and have a look at. I think the recommendation with regards to ecology is certainly difficult given the advice that you've gotten from your biodiversity officers. I think it would be more beneficial if members were to provide what information you request from the applicant in order to make this application acceptable, and officers can certainly go away and have those conversations directly with the applicant and obviously share that with the community and local residents in terms of the acceptability of the proposals.
There's something here about silage disposal. That wasn't seemed deemed satisfactory by some comments made. And to be quite honest, I think the main thrust is that the members are just not comfortable with what has gone on. Yes, the matters we've raised are not within the planning application, but it impinge on our psychology on how we deal with things. I can understand where you're coming from.
Councillor Eason, they're not reasons to refuse a planning application, though, and I have to go back to this point in terms of, is the development before you unacceptable? Does it have a harmful impact on the landscape? Does it have a harmful impact on ecology? These are the matters where you as a planning committee have the right to refuse a planning application if it doesn't accord with your planning policies within the LDP, not within aspects in relation to you're not happy with the applications being presented. That isn't what's before you. Is the development acceptable? And as officers, we need to be guided by yourselves now. We've made a recommendation that this development is acceptable and in accordance with the local development plan. What are the reasons that you feel, as a planning committee, this development is unacceptable? Or alternatively, defer the application and give us some guidance with regards to what information you as planning committee members want to enable this as a positive determination.
So you've used the word defer, have you?
If members are minded to refuse this application, then we'll bring the application back next month, but that will give the applicant time to supply that information to the planning committee members.
They know what information they're going to be providing. Councillor Powell.
Sorry. I think probably one of the things that's made us questioning, if you're building a shed for horses, ponies, whatever, that they built it in such a way that it's overstrong. They built it as though they're building a house in a way. You know what I mean? Normally, if you build a shed for animals, you don't build it quite to that extent. I think that's what's making people cautious. I think it's one of the things I would think.
So, Councillor Powell, you would like it just to be timber construction rather than block work? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that, yes.
Chair, as I mentioned when I spoke, I mentioned that, and looking at how it's positioned and the roller shutter door or whatever, it looks like it could be used as a garage in the future.
Mm. I've never seen roller shutter door on an animal
Councillor
shed in
McKenna.
all my life. We never have a roller shutter door on an animal shed. Oh, sorry.
Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concerns are around the ecology, really. You know, if we've got digging of cesspits that have gone on site, we've got hard stands and we've got a menage, stables, barn. To me, that says there's going to be a large amount of groundworks taking place. I understand that the report isn't available to the public because there's sensitive information. Now, what that information is, as a planning committee member trying to make a decision on this, I find it quite concerning that as a committee we haven't seen sight of that information. That can be given to us privately, and it doesn't have to be shared with the public. You know, very often if we see reports and information's been redacted, it's just been blacked out. So I do have concerns about that because we should have transparency within this process. So yeah, that just doesn't sit comfortable with me. So I would like to see sight of that report. I understand, like I said, it's not to go in the public domain, but as a planning committee member making a decision such as this, which is quite emotive, you've got quite a lot of unhappy residents, I think that we need to have clarity. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, Councillor McKenna, yeah, certainly planning committee members can certainly see ecology surveys. That's not done on every single application, because you do have the conclusions and summaries from your biodiversity officer in terms of their professional opinion, but certainly we can do that as a matter of course going forward on all applications if you would like, similarly to any other reports, and that isn't a problem or an issue. Obviously, you are making a recommendation based on your biodiversity officer's comments. But we can certainly share that, yes, that's no problem at all.
Councillor Bond.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't realise I spoke out of turn. I thought it was my turn before, beg your pardon. So it is a wooden structure, no block work. It is the ecology and section for the request number 5, condition 5, for the full days of landscape works, and the hard and soft landscape works could be carried out. Sorry, prior to commencement of development. It'd be good to see that soft landscape works, so we can really assure ourselves that it's going to meet what we think should be there. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
Yeah, we've got a construction guide for the riding area, but there's no site-specific explanation for that specific site about how drainage is going to be handled. So I'd like to see something advising us, and also that if the horses are going to be grazing the lower field behind the proposed hedge, you know, any drainage down there is going to make that land quite boggy. So I'd like to see some kind of, I don't know whether SUDS is appropriate in this case, but there's going to be a fairly permanent menage area going in there. We've got a generic guide to how it's fitted, but we haven't got anything site specific, so I'd like to see.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Yes, that's helpful for the applicant in terms of those drainage aspects as well, so we can certainly go back from that. Just to sort of try and focus again in terms of the discussions, members have raised concerns with regards to overdevelopment, ecology concerns, and have given us some guidance in relation to some information that's required from the members. So if members are satisfied, we will go away as officers, have those conversations with the applicants and try and get that information for you. If not, bring those reasons for refusal back for you. I have to advise, I don't feel that those reasons for refusal are very based in terms of evidence, and I would have concern in relation to a planning appeal based on those reasons. But obviously, as members of the planning committee, this is your decision, and my recommendation to you is that we have a look in terms of whether we can find a way to make this a positive determination. So we'll go away on that basis and bring the application back to you, either with additional information or with those reasons for refusals as you've outlined to us.
You missed out manure management. No details have been provided pertaining to manure management, because that was a concern about that building up.
That is a condition, but if members want us to seek that before, then we can certainly do that.
I meant to say that, thank you. I know it's nothing to do with this, but can we, well, no, we can't, I guess, be told when the enforcement notice is effective, when it needs to be adhered to? We can't be told this, can we?
Yeah, Councillor Bond, just to confirm on that. So all enforcement notices require an initial month's period to take effect. That is the recipient's or any recipient's window and right to submit an appeal against that notice. If no appeal is made, then in this instance there is a 3-month period for compliance. But obviously if that's subject to an appeal, then that will go through the proper appeals process through PEDU. But that's what's set out on the notice served. Hopefully that just confirms.
Thank you.
Okay, then it appears that we're done with that item. It might be.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry,
just come in.
Yeah, of course.
Just put my hand up again. Sorry. Yeah, just regarding the manure, also any other waste from the site, because residents have mentioned about that there's been burning on site. So, you know, it might not just be a case of manure, but also other waste that may come from the site. And also, I'd like to have some more information regarding lighting, because that will could obviously have an impact on not only ecology, but also neighbouring residents. I think Councillor Powell brought something up in the discussion about lighting. I'd just like some more information on that as well from the applicant, please. Thank you.
Okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Would somebody be so kind as to let the chair know he's able to come back in now?
Right, everybody, just waiting for Councillor Birch to come back, and then we'll continue with the last item. If any of you at the back want to leave now, you can, or you're welcome to stay to the end of the meeting. There's only a couple of minutes when Councillor Birch comes back. Oh, yes, she is. Okay, so we move on now to item 5.1. It's an appeals decision, and Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's just for your information, members. Have we got any slides on this? Well, just might aid with some context. Okay, thank you. Again, so this is just for your information, members. So this planning permission was granted for the change of use of the land you can see edged in red on screen. This is from agricultural land to effectively an extension of the residential garden curtilage of the property to the north. This was subject to a number of conditions, and the applicant exercised their right to appeal against the conditions imposed by the grant of planning permission. It was specific to condition 6 of the planning consent, which sought to remove the ability to store motor vehicles, caravans, mobile homes within the extended garden curtilage. And that was done on, that condition was imposed in the interest of visual amenity and wider landscape concerns. However, the appointed inspector has deleted the condition and has allowed the appeal, so that condition is no longer part of the planning permission. The appointed inspector cited a number of reasons for doing that, including that if those sort of structures, vehicles, caravans, etc., were stored that were no longer, to an extent and to a level that were no longer incidental or ancillary to the dwelling, then it would need permission in its own right, and therefore the condition wasn't necessary. So that's one of the reasons why that condition was deleted. The inspector did also exercise their right to vary some of the landscaping conditions. So the appellant is now required to submit to us a scheme of soft landscaping to provide a sort of effectively a natural boundary between the site and some of the neighbouring properties that adjoin the application site. So that will now have to be submitted as a discharge of condition application to the local planning authority. But yeah, that is the appeal as succinctly as I can present it. Thank you, members. Okay, thank you, Andrew. And that concludes the business of the meeting. Can I just finish up by thanking Councillor Rook for taking over item 4.2. Thanks everybody for your attendance, and we'll see you next time.